November 25th. We have a few people out for they have to attend a different meeting right now. But I did want to mention a few things because there's been a lot of really great recent activity happening. A lot of testing has been being created and added, and a lot of testing has been fixed and re-enabled. So our grid, if we look at what's happening in a nightly build, there are more tests running now than ever before. So I'll quickly just pop into our directory structure for a moment to say, in the past we've had the multi-byte character set tests and synthetic GC workload tests here. There's a new folder called security that has some additional tests that were added by Andreas. And there's a pull request that will add some more testing around whether or not our build and packaging story at the project is working. So expect to see some additional stuff going into the functional folder. And as we know, the functional folder is actually not just populated by contents from this repo, but the functional folder, as we lay down the test material for Aqua, we go and fetch the functional tests from OpenJ9 as well. So I'm going to step us through some of that again, because I know there are a lot of new people at the project and they may not have that overview in their heads. And interrupt me at any point during this very quick summary if people have questions, or if people wanted to add any notes or ask questions about any of these items. Mesba, I know you reviewed some of the system test stuff. Do you have a good understanding of some of the stuff that Simon's been delivering? And I know you've also been delivering some great new improvements as well. Oh, there's Simon. Actually, Simon could maybe give us a little overview as well. Hi, Simon. We're just talking.
The second half of that sentence.
That's right. We've been talking about you. I was just mentioning and then just shared some of the recent additions to the functional suite. We have added some here within the OpenJDK test repo, and there have been some enabled by team members Longyu and Oscar in the OpenJ9 repo. And since we pull functional test material from both places, we benefit from having some new tests. But also, the next point being that you have been fixing and re-enabling many tests. So that's kind of a wonderful thing, because now more system tests than I think ever are running. So I don't know if you wanted to say a few words relating to that, or I didn't put links yet here, but
I can say what I can remember. I'm not sure how much of the words are going to mean that much to all the audience, but I find I find quite a few issues that all relate to the same underlying problem once I've examined them a bit. So there were a bunch of tests which do Java lang management, which is where one JVM can ask either itself or another JVM via an API as to things like how much CPU it's using and so on. And there was what turned out to be quite a simple timing issue, but because there were two sides, a client side and a server, that were kind of timing out independently, that took a bit of getting to the bottom of. Then I sorted that out. There was a bug in the STF framework that we use. It relies on Perl for its scripting mechanism, and what had gone unnoticed for quite a long time is that we'd started using 64-bit Perl, and the way the framework gets the PID out of any processes it starts only worked on 32-bit Perl. So we were happily going around monitoring processes with a completely random number that had nothing to do with the process that we'd started.
Oh, exciting.
So having fixed that, that meant that we were actually collecting dumps for processes that we should have been collecting dump for, and killing processes that we should have been killing. And I suspect that that also contributed to some of the issues, though not all, where we've had test processes left lying around on machines after the test runs have finished because they haven't been killed properly.
Right. Yeah.
And now I find another set of tests to do with Lambda testing. And again, I've done some investigation today. I think I know pretty well exactly what's going on. But it's quite strange. There's one particular test that uses parallel streams that uses an awful lot of storage. I'm not sure how it can use so much storage, but it does in the implementation. OpenJ9 uses a bit more than Hotspot, but they both use an awful lot. But where the OpenJ9 has the XL builds with the full 64-bit pointers, that uses a lot more heap, almost double, because most of what's on the heap is in fact pointers, and they're going out of memory. So I should be able to have a fix for that, which is basically to up the heap size. But I have noticed that as you approach that heap limit where they start going out of memory, the OpenJ9 test will just sit there and eat all of your CPU for as long as you leave it.
Oh, exciting.
It test kills it after an hour. I don't know whether it would actually ever end, but it would be a test that normally takes 30 seconds was used all the CPU for an hour, presumably go thrashing around and around in garbage collection. So I shall point this out to our OpenJ9 colleagues and they can either investigate further or not. But I should be able to get all those tests back running and stable soon as well.
Beauty. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Some progress.
Yeah. Is there any kind of thing you're looking forward to? Like what you're picking next off the pile, or are you just plowing through the backlog there?
I'm just going through them. Actually, I'm going to get diverted a bit by OpenJ9 again at the Eclipse project, where they also run the tests.
Yeah.
Since I fixed this thing about killing the right things with the right process number, they're getting intermittent access is denied when we try to kill processes. Oh. I have no idea what's doing that, so I'll spend a bit of time looking into that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for the update.
In the same run, it happily kills loads of processes with exactly the same mechanism, so I don't know why it should fail 1 in 100. But.
And I don't think we've seen that at the Adopt Jenkins server at all. Yeah, interesting. Cool. Okay, well, it'll be interesting to follow up with you how that goes. I'm going to reshare again just so we can see that there's one kind of other item I wanted to add to today's meeting since we've lost Renfei for the day to another meeting. He was going to do a demo of how you can utilize the features that he's been adding to TKG about more granular disabling and re-enabling of tests, but we'll push that to the next meeting. And I wanted to just revisit a very high-level overview of how Aqua is structured. I know everyone on this call understands it already, but I wanted it so I can take the recording and share it with new people. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to just pop up a little diagram of the actual project. So this is thanks to Hendrik, who's working in the community channel of our Slack workspace to get feedback on our flyer. And all of you can see that there's this kind of flow where we take OpenJDK sources or OpenJDK and OpenJ9 sources and put them into this machine, build and test machine, if you will, and with some AdoptOpenJDK build scripts. What I wanted to just talk about very briefly today is the section where the traffic lights are and this OpenJDK tests repo that then opens the world up to other test material that's in other repos. So I just wanted to step through some of that today. And if you look at that repo, you'll see that it's organized with some folders or directories called external, functional, JCK, OpenJDK, perf, and system. And those directories align with the test groups that we kind of logically divide our tests up by. And we've named them that so that the directory structure and the name of the top level targets all match each other. So if you're wondering about, I want to run some system tests, the map to those system tests lives within that folder. Quick note about where these tests come from. I've mentioned that we have functional tests that we store here within this repo, but we also pull functional tests from the OpenJ9 project. We have, for JCK folder, we will be having test material through an agreement with the Eclipse Foundation and Oracle and OCTLA. People who want to use this Aqua suite, if they also have an agreement with Oracle to get access to those private JCK compliance tests, this is the metadata that will allow you to automate the running of those tests. But you can only run them if you have the test material, and you can only have the test material if you have an agreement. Okay. OpenJDK, we pull that open source test material from the OpenJDK repo. System, we pull, as I had kind of quickly shown as Simon was talking, we pull a framework called STF and a test material from the OpenJDK system test directory. And in the case of testing OpenJ9, there's also an OpenJ9 system test repo that we pull test material from. In this diagram, I have not labeled perf and external for a reason. That's because it's too long to list in a little text field where we pull this material from, because each of these folders contain many subfolders. So perf, we have 80 plus benchmarks coming from several open source locations, and external, again, we have nearly 20 different Java applications that we pull and are able to run the functional suite of. All right, quick note here then is for each one of those groups, so we have a functional group, an OpenJDK group, system, external, JCK, and perf. They have underlying test frameworks, and we know that they come from various open source or private locations, depending on what they are. And instead of having to deal with each one of these, and I think there are actually more than JTReg, OpenJDK has some test NG material and G-test material. But you get the idea. Instead of dealing with all of these different test frameworks, we've overlaid something called Test Kit Gen so that we can make them behave in the same way, if you will. This thin layer that lays over top all of these diverse set of test material allows us to then write automation to one standard way of describing things rather than 6 or 7 ways of describing things. So that's kind of the general overview. And I'm going to quickly dive into what a playlist can look like and just give a little real world view of this. But we divide the test material up. We can label it via a playlist into different levels. We can tag it as being appropriate for different implementations. We can talk about subsets or versions of Java where a test may be applicable to a particular version but not to another. And then there are different types of tests, some that are pure Java tests, some that rely on some native libraries. So all of these things can be described, and they can be described in a file called playlist.xml. And it's a very simple structure, and when we talk about the different aspects like what level, what group, what impl each one of these apply to, this is how you would define it. And you'll see next meeting how you can disable by any of these depending on what issues you're seeing in your build farm. Okay, but just back to the very final piece of the overview. In terms of what happens when we set up and run tests locally, and I won't talk about today how we run them in Jenkins, but it's essentially invoking these local commands or these command line layer instructions. All we're really doing is starting with the map of where we get all the test material, and those maps exist in this repo called OpenJDK tests. And then we call get, which then picks up that test kit gen layer. And from there, then you tell test kit gen what type of build or what type of test material you want to build, and then what target you want to run, what tests you want to execute. So that's the very high level look of the thing. There isn't a whole lot more than that. Once you've compiled your test material, and you may want to run different tests. I'm currently testing a J9 latest release, so I can run tests that are valid for that implementation, and away I go. So it's fairly straightforward. Why do I want to talk about this again today? Just because as we have more members of the community starting to write tests and try to understand where things fit in, there's not really, the mess underneath this test kit gen layer is that we have tests all over the place. When a team has to go and triage different things, it is useful to say, I know how to run this perf benchmark because I'm experienced with running this functional test. So all I need to do is go look in the map within the OpenJDK tests directories and say, if I need to know how to run a particular functional test, and I want to go and see this new test that Andreas added, I can know that I can go make _security tests on my command line, and it's going to execute this command and run the new test that he's added. So hopefully that gives a very quick initial overview of how things work. There's a lot of details that I'm skipping over for this, but I'll close it there and stop sharing so that I can take this as a recording. Okay, so that's all I had for that overview. I wanted to open up for any other business or questions that people may have. I don't expect we're going to go the whole half hour today because we're a small team right now. But anything people wanted to add to that or questions people had? Okay, so I think for today's meeting, that's all we had on the agenda. Next up, for sure, will be Renfei demoing some of the ways we can exclude, and including by comments into Git repos, so that we can do that by using GitHub Actions. I think also by next meeting, Sophia and I can talk about a blog post that we're writing to introduce a broader community to using our Run Aqua and our Build JDK and Build OpenJ9 GitHub Actions, so that if people wanted to be running testing in their local repo using GitHub Actions and the GitHub resources that are freely available for people to use, they can know how and benefit from that. And if other folks have things they'd like to add to the agenda, just let me know or throw a note into Slack. And that's all we have. All right, thanks.
Bye.